I'm Lily.
And I'm Sophie.
And welcome to the Keeping Tabs podcast hosted by the Princeton Public Library's Teen Advisory Board.
We interview authors to learn more about the writing process.
Hello! Today we are here with Maureen Johnson, the #1 New York Times and USA Today bestselling author. Maureen Johnson is the author of several young adult contemporary novels, including The Key to the Golden Firebird, 13 Little Blue Envelopes, and the Suite Scarlett series. She has also written the Shades of London series and the incredibly popular Truly Devious series. A fun fact about Maureen is that she is the voice of intern Maureen on the comedy horror podcast Welcome to Night Vale. So welcome. We're so excited to have you today.
I'm very happy to be here. I'm not in my house. I live in New York City. I'm staying with my parents. So excitingly, you don't know this if you're listening, but right above my head is a huge collection, and it wraps all the way around the room of Cat's Meow Villages.
Oh my gosh.
Oh yes. So I'm in a room of so many collections. My mother has collections.
I love that.
That is so fun. Maybe we'll see more. Oh, I see right behind you on your windowsill. That's super cool.
It goes all the way around the room.
That's great.
This is like a random question. In Let It Snow, I think the short story you wrote, did the main character, her mom had like all these random collections? Is that, oh my gosh, that's so cool.
Yes, my mother collected the Dickens Christmas Village. And at the height of her collecting, she would she'd bring in an actual piece of furniture at Christmas time, which was this custom made tabletop. And it took her 2 weeks to assemble it all because she had kind of snow drifts and a little tray, like rail track, and she had a little lake cut, and it was a whole thing. So eventually I put it right into the story, her love of what I called the Floby Christmas Village. And when they made the Netflix movie and they put it in the movie, when we went up to visit the set, they said, "Oh, give us a picture of your mother tonight." And so I got one on my phone, and in the morning they had 3D'd created a little elf of my mother and put her in the village so that there's a little elf of my mother in the movie.
I love the book and the movie. So now I'm going to have to go rewatch the movie and look at all the elves, because I guess that never crossed my mind.
She's in there somewhere. And then they boxed her up and sent her to me when the movie was done.
That's great.
That is so cool. Oh my gosh. I'm glad you're in your parents' house, because then we got that fun anecdote.
Yeah, it's not in the city because they're ripping apart the apartment next to mine. So there's always something going on in New York. It is like living in a sitcom. There's always some kind of nonsense. So
yes, definitely.
All right. So I guess we're just going to get into it. So the concepts for your mystery novels are gripping and complex, and we're really just wondering how you craft the backstory and set up for intricate, often historical mysteries.
I like historical mysteries and cold cases and classic mysteries, straight up classic fair play mysteries. And detective stories. Those are the books I grew up reading and was really obsessed with from the time the first book I remember reading. Actually, the first book I really read all the way through was The Hound of the Baskervilles, because I got a children's edition when I was 4. And I can tell you, I was sitting on the living room floor reading it. And I was just amazed at how little tiny 4-year-old being introduced to Sherlock Holmes. And I was immediately transfixed by this person who finds out the things that aren't known and solves these problems through clever thinking and noticing things. And I was the little kid that read every single mystery that she could get her hands on. I still read The Weston Game once a year. And so when I finally was like, I need to write a mystery, and I don't know why I haven't. I think it's because I really love them, and they had some sort of special place in my heart that I was afraid to go to the place that really meant a lot to me, if that makes any sense. I think sometimes we're afraid of the things that we really value, and you don't think people will understand it or, value it in the same way, or that you'll get it wrong, or I don't know. But I spent a lot of time thinking about why these crimes happen. And that's where I begin with all of these. And also I write classic kind of style. So they're not kind of gritty and realistic. I think everybody knows in these that we're playing a game, like Knives Out or Glass Onion. We all know we're playing a game. together, which is something I love. So I really think about the why. That's how everything starts, is the why. I'm working on the new one now, and all I do is hammer down and drill down on the why.
It's so exciting to hear that you're working on the new one, because I've been reloading your Goodreads page to see if you were going to write another book in the series. So
there are 2 more Stevie Bell books coming. And the immediate next book is called Death at Morning House. And it's not a Stevie Bell, it's a standalone mystery. And that's what's coming up next. And then 2 more Stevie Bells right after that. So I got lots of stuff going on. I got notebooks everywhere.
Yes, we are so excited.
It's funny that you
here's one.
Fun. It's funny you mentioned the Weston game, because when I think mystery, I always think Weston game, because that was like the first book that I remember like independently loving without like an influence from someone else, if that makes sense. And now when I think about your works, I feel like I can see almost an inspiration taken from that. Do you think that that's like, you said you read that every year. Do you think it's been like an impactful novel for you?
Yes. I love Turtle Exler. I mean, that book holds up too. What's amazing, that book was, I think it won the Newbery in 78. And it really stands the test of time. And because it's so well done. And it's so fun and so interesting. If you've never read it, I really recommend finding a copy and reading it. It's a puzzle mystery about people that live in this apartment building on Lake. It's one of the Great Lakes, but basically I think somewhere outside of Chicago. And they basically find out that they're all related in some way to this man, Sam Westing, who left behind this giant fortune. And he's like, you're my heirs and I'm pairing you up, and you all have to solve my riddle about my death and my fortune. And he puts them in pairs, very unusual pairs of young and old, and people from all different backgrounds, people of all different abilities. And it really has this very varied and interesting cast of people and how they all work together.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite books, honestly, that I still remember. And I think there's some books that stick with you that are timeless, which I think is a really hard thing to do with writing, because, you write what you write with the times. But I think that book has managed to stand the test of everything that's happened in the last 40 something years.
Yeah, it's a great mystery. And it meant so much to me as a kid, and it still does. It's just, when I kind of think about it, it's sort of like home. I sort of live at Sunset Towers a little bit, which is the house, the building that they all live in.
That is a perfect transition, because the setting of the Truly Devious series, Ellingham Academy, to me, it's a very comforting setting, and it kind of feels like home to me. I wish I could go there.
Yay! Me too.
It's true. Like, I can see it in my mind so clearly. You did such a good job describing it all, and with the map and everything. I can't believe it's not real. So how do you create an atmospheric, transportive setting for your novels?
I spend a lot of time, I'm a map obsessive, and I spend a lot of time building the architecture of all the places in my books, especially somewhere like Ellingham. There's so much of Ellingham, the school, the grounds, the buildings. It matters. It's all very much a character and a part of the story. So I really built it from the ground up. I built Stevie first because I wanted to have a detective. And then I built the school around her, sort of stone by stone and brick by brick, to meet our needs of this whole story experience. So I worked under the ground. I worked up in the mountains. I figured out how to level the ground. I thought about the windows, the doors, the placements of all the buildings. And I spent a lot of time drawing a really terrible map, but it was highly accurate, and it looked like a 5-year-old had drawn it, but it was an incredibly accurate map. And there's a picture of it in the book, and it's done by an amazing artist. And that map matters. It actually fully comes into play in the story to help solve it. So there's a map in all of the Stevie Bell mysteries so far, and probably will be. And they always have a clue, or they always matter. There's always some information in there that you need to know. So I love a map. I'm obsessed with maps. All my books, I've always consulted maps.
I love that. I was shrieking when I read The Hand on the Wall and Stevie was figuring out like the map related clue. I was like, it's been there the whole time. Yeah.
It was very pleasing to me. I have to admit, that was very pleasing to me. that was a weird one because that's Truly Devious, The Vanishing Stair, and The Hand of the Wall are all separate mysteries and one mystery, which is a little hard to do. And it was a little tricky. So they were all kind of arced out at once. So it was, I developed the grand plan, the big backstory of what happened in the 1930s and what happened in the present day. And so I had basically these two columns of past and present and how they intertwined and how I would divide up the story so that with each book you got to solve, but another situation that you were in order to build to the last one where you got the answers to everything.
That flows perfectly into our next question for you, which you've already kind of touched on, but is there anything else you want to add? And the idea that it's super unique that you were able to write a mystery series where the mystery is solved over the course of 3 books while getting some sense of satisfaction at the end of each. So how did you plot the Truly Devious series, and did you know what was going to happen in each book in the series before Truly Devious was published, or did your idea of the plot change?
With my mysteries, I always know the answers first. I don't do anything else until I've sort of written the ending or the back case file so that I understand all of the underlying circumstances. So I knew everything that had happened in the past, and I knew the basic arc of events in the present. And then I have a big old whiteboard in my office, and there was a lot of thinking about where the dividing lines in the action could be. So I used a real kind of classical 3-act structure to bring an end to each bit. It was a little bit of a dicey proposition, honestly, to write a mystery in 3 parts, but there are so many things that are going on in this particular story and so much information. I hopefully pulled it off. I got yelled at a lot as they were published, each one, but I'm like, well, now all 3 are out, so nobody can yell at me because like it's all there if you want to find out everything that happens. And then each one after that is a standalone. It felt like I was dancing on a wire a little bit, but I at least had all my back. I knew what I was doing. I'm like, I have it. I know what's going to happen. Just if I can get everyone to come with me. So I hope I did.
You definitely got me to come with you, and I know a lot of other people. And I think that you structuring the kind of the 3-book series made people care about Stevie and her friends so much because they got to be more of the main focus than in other young adult mysteries where it's a standalone and you like the character, but you don't spend as much time with them because there's like so much going on in the plot. So I really admire that about your series.
I wanted a detective because I love a detective. And I thought about how could I make and a group of people and a sense of place and time. So I really wanted them to have their whole establishing arc and then, move on from there to solve other cases.
Yes, I'm so looking forward to reading all the cases that Stevie and her friends solve. I also wanted to talk about the ephemera in your books. I know the Truly Devious series has like news articles, and the Truly Devious letter is the thing that starts off the whole book. So how do you write the ephemera in your books? And then how do you place it at the perfect time to move the plot forward in your novels and keep readers engaged?
Those are some of my favorite parts. I love mysteries that are based on that, things that are kind of case files. I love going through case files. And having to kind of tease through a stack of stuff, different documents and evidence. I use a program called Scrivener. A lot of writers, most writers I know use Scriveners. Of the people I kind of hang out with, we all use Scrivener, which is a really great, if you're interested in writing, I think a really great program to work with. It's not complicated, but it divides, you can divide all your, I don't write in order. I write completely out of order. Even I have outlines, so I know what I'm doing, but I'll start little sections and try them out. So I can have a whole running list of little files on the side and move them around. So I have, interview 1, interview 2, letter, whatever I could create all of those at once and then sort of read them all together. Sometimes I redivide them, and then I can kind of move them and try them in different positions to see what feels exactly right. Because sometimes I'm like, no, it doesn't quite work there. I'm going to move that up there, or I'm going to switch these 2 around. Or I switched how I did some of the interviews in 9 Liars. They were all individual interviews. I put some of them together and made them made that information work together. And so I kind of do that. I write out of order. I use a program where I can keep all my separate text files. And then I kind of tweezer it around a little bit just to see what I think will work the best.
Hearing that, I'm getting chills because reading the ephemera, I could see how it was a total complete picture, but readers were only getting little bits of it at a time. So I love hearing that you wrote it all at once because that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I write a lot of these things. I have kind of the actual chunks of information. So somewhere out there, it's not like I didn't know what was happening. I'm always like, I literally have solved files. Like, here's everything. And sometimes I even write the end sections first, so that all of those details are really baked in, because you have to know all of those things. The crimes or the central events, the clues, the little bits you get. I always think of it as the crime is this kind of event in the center, like a burning fire. And then there's stuff kind of flying off of it. Little pieces of paper, footprints, a single twig, and the spirals kind of go out and they widen with time. So by the end, you're out here and you've started 5 days out, a week out. There's just a bit of this, a bit of paper, and you work slowly and slowly to get into the center. This is always how I picture it, whether or not makes any sense to anyone else. This is always how I picture it. Little thing in the center, and then these spirals going out. And then I kind of tweezer these little details in backwards. Does that make any sense? It's very visual to me.
It makes so much sense. That's how it feels reading your books. I don't know if that makes sense, but I can tell that, like, I can see it in my head what you're talking about as a reader.
Yeah, I build the core first. So all of that stuff is really set in stone, and I make sure that I know that it actually works, that everything works. And then I kind of tease out what the pieces of information are that I'm going to leave along the way.
Yes, I can definitely, zooming out and thinking about how you wrote the series as someone who read it, that definitely makes a lot of sense. And I also wanted to say that the Truly Devious series is just an absolute delight to read, especially because I adore Stevie and her friends, and even the minor side characters in the series are distinct and memorable. So how do you create a cast of quirky, fully realized characters for readers to fall in love with?
Well, thank you for saying that. The answer is I don't know. I just kind of work at it. I don't know what the answer is aside from working at it and kind of just thinking about people I know or what kind of people I might like to meet. There's a character called Nate in this, who was a writer who is really paranoid about writing and is always trying to avoid writing. And it's the one thing he has to do. And that is me and every writer I know. So he is near and dear to my heart. He is kind of me and every writer squirreling around through the story, trying to face the task of writing or avoid it. So that's just a shout out to all the writers out there.
I love Nate so much. He's definitely one of my favorite characters. So I like hearing that there are people in the real world who, think the same way he does.
Me and yeah, like everybody. I have to write.
Yeah.
It's the thing you love the most and the thing you fear the most.
That makes complete sense to me. And I think the way you phrase everything is completely matching to the way you write, which I think is a really interesting thing to see when you read someone's words on their page and then have a conversation with them. It's a great connection to make. Anyway, how do you craft witty dialogue that is realistic and can make readers actually laugh even when a situation isn't so funny?
I always say, like, I don't know, and yet I do. I mean, my background when I was learning to write and spent a lot of time both teaching myself and going to school. So I did 2 programs at the same time when I did my graduate work. I was in the writing program and I was in the theater program for theatrical dramaturgy. So I was doing 2 MFAs at once, which is because I want to Leroy Jenkins my way through life, I guess. I'm like, what's worse than 1 MFA, 2 MFAs? But my job was, I was always thinking about and working with dialogue. I worked on a lot of scripts. So I really spent a lot of time reading scripts, reading plays, and thinking about the impact of conversation and how conversation was delivered. Whether I was in theater school or reading a play, or it's just you have to work on developing your ear, and it's sort of like music. You have to have, like, it's an ear thing. You have to feel it and sense it and listen to people and listen to cadences, and also realize that dialogue is some of the most valuable space that you have. And it does multiple things at once. It reveals information, it reveals character, it propels action. It's like a superfood, it's one of those, it's like it's one of the most important things you have. And every line of it can do so many things at once that you don't want to waste your time too much, even though you do have to sometimes have them say things that aren't that important. But like, it's not like they can just constantly go around saying important things, but it's some of the most valuable space you have. And it's so flexible, and it does so many, like I said, it does so many different things. And I don't know, I think people are funny, especially I think pressure is funny. It can be very funny. And again, these are classic mysteries, so they're not as gritty. So I think that answering, it's the finding humor. This is a ridiculous situation and terrifying, and the only way I'm going to survive is by laughing through it. Maybe that's just also my philosophy on life. All of these things simply require practice, though. It's like just years of listening to and working with dialogue.
I feel like you gave us so much wisdom about the value of dialogue.
Did I? Yeah.
I think you might have. Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's powerful stuff, and it like there's simple things like you do in theater school, like A dialogue and B dialogue, where you'll do an exercise where you write the A dialogue, which is literally what people say or what people mean. Like, you could write a dialogue that was, I have always hated you. I have always hated you too. And that's the A dialogue. And then you write the B dialogue, which is what actually comes out of someone's mouth, which is like, I got you that cake and you never even finished it. Well, I keep telling you, I don't like cake, and you don't listen to me, or something. Like, what people actually say, but what they mean. We always know what the meaning is behind it. So things like that.
That is so cool. That's cool. I've never heard someone talk about dialogue in that way. So that's very interesting. I also wanted to talk about the riddles and clues present in the Truly Devious series, because they're incredibly well crafted. They're puzzling and they're clever. And when Stevie solves them, it feels like I should have been able to figure them out. Like you were talking about a fair play mystery, but I never can figure them out. So how do you create these riddles? And also, the staircase riddle in the first 2 books of the series is a major clue to the culprit behind the Truly Devious murders. So did any readers manage to figure it out early on? Were they tweeting you?
I think people, yeah, I mean, some people, I think maybe somebody has said that they had worked it out. It was just one of those things where I really tried to make everything work in multiple ways, or plant things that would do multiple jobs. Or I like to plant little springs and traps and things, so like when it goes off later, it's extra rewarding when it's like, oh, actually there was something about the stair. Like that's why they kept talking about the stairs. Just time, really, just time, and me and a pen and a notebook trying to think of a riddle. A surprising amount is just working on it. It's so boring an explanation, but so much of writing is practice and time and concentration. You learn to write by reading and writing, and there's really no other way. And you write the book by writing the book, and each book is written in its own way. What's great about writing is that there are so few barriers to entry. It's open to everybody. You just have to kind of put in the time and the concentration. So, yeah, like it's a lot of it is just doing it, just sitting there over and over again and failing, and just most of the time spent writing is writing the wrong thing. But that's valuable, because the writing the wrong thing is what gets you to write the right thing. It's the necessary and unmissable step in the process.
Based on what you've been saying, it seems that you have a very clear process for how you write your books, and you have a very clear set. Even if the process even if the process isn't always the same, you know what you want to do and how to execute it. So you've written 2 mystery series. How does the writing process for your Shades of London series compare to that of Truly Devious?
I really, really knew what the answers were in Truly Devious. I mostly knew what the answers were in Shades of London. Because Shades of London, I had a little more leeway because of magic systems, which I could develop and change to get more, to kind of squeeze more information out of the world. I had a little bit more, a few more things to play with and work with. Whereas the Truly Devious series don't have that aspect. And so I'm very much working in the sandbox of physical reality as we know it, which is it's a super fun sandbox. I imagine all these things like sandboxes. I'm a real sandbox kind of person. You know, I like to play and work with and shape and just kind of get dirty and just go, make it a thing. Yeah, writing is so kind of organic and messy and enjoyable like that. So I think more people need to embrace the mess of things. Making things is messy and it's great.
I agree. I don't think there's one clear way to do anything.
No.
And if we did that, we'd end up with the same book over and over again. Who wants that?
You write your books the way that you write them. So if anyone's like, I know how to write a book and this is the only way, I'm like, well, yours is the only advice I'm not taking.
That's a good kind of life idiom and mindset to have, especially about writing. I'm not going to take your advice then. I like that.
Yeah, it's individual to everybody.
Definitely.
There are lots of tips and tricks and things people might want to try out, but there is no one way to do it. And anyone that says there is actually full of it.
100%. I agree. I also wanted to talk about, like, you've written so many different books from a wide range of genres. So how does writing a young adult romance series compare to writing a young adult mystery series?
I am better at the mysteries. I avoid the romance usually like the plague. Even though I've done it, people have to pin me down. Like I'm good friends with Holly Black, and she's always sidling up to me going, Maureen, how's the romance plot going? I go, and I run away and she follows me. She has literally chased me across pools. Maureen, you can't get out. Like it's come tell me your romance. Yeah, that's a lot of times when I rely on my friends, like, okay, I'm writing this romance part and here's what I've got and here's what I'm thinking and here's the beats I have so far and then they help advise me, like, what if you tried this? And I was like, well, then that would happen and then this would happen and what if I did this? So that's one area where I fight and I struggle and I claw at the walls.
I love the collaborative aspect of that, though. I'm glad you have Holly Black and your other writer friends to chase you around pools, because you get such beautiful material out of that.
There's a lot of just talking. We go on retreats a lot together or spend time together. And I think the people that see us there are very puzzled because some of these are like very beautiful, warm places where people go to these places and they jet ski. And then they look at us and we're just sitting there and they're like, don't you want to, I don't know, windsurf or something? And we're like, no, this is what we do. This is it. What you're seeing here, everyone typing or everyone sitting around talking about some sort of story mechanic. That's it. This is what you get.
That's the dream.
It is the dream. It's so good.
I feel like better doing that in a really nice location by the water than in a place you don't want to be. That's how I look at it.
Well, I'm very lucky that, you know, it's often Cassie Claire that organizes them. But or just even going up to their houses and spending time or calling them in the middle of the night. And like, I don't know what I'm doing.
So would you say that you learn a lot from your writers group and your writer friends? You guys collaborate a lot?
Or just talk it through. Everybody talks through everybody's story problems.
It's crazy, like, hearing you say this is like, you know how on a TV show they have a crossover episode, and it's like, "Oh, your favorite characters from New Girl are in Brooklyn Nine-Nine," and that's weird. Hearing you talk about Holly Black and Cassie Clare is like, "Oh my gosh, 3 amazing authors are friends in the real world." That's crazy to think about. It's very funny to me, so that's really nice that you guys have each other to bounce ideas off of.
Or just kind of talk through all the various ideas and aspects of story, and or just how to handle certain book issues. There's also Robin Wasserman and Kelly Link and Lee Bardugo, and there's a lot of, and we like, it's a, yeah, just literally just sitting around talking it through. It's
Yeah.
good to have a group of people that you can, and also Holly in particular wants to talk about story day and night, and she will sidle up to you at all times and go, "Tell me your story problem. What's going on? Let's talk about plot." Holly is like the Dr. House of books, though. She always figures out what's wrong, and it's never the thing you thought it was.
I love that. That's so cool.
She's one of our great national treasures.
I agree.
Yeah.
So, moving forward with your Truly Devious series, what's it like to be continuing that series after the first mystery's already been solved?
It's great. Because once established, you can bring cases to your detective in a way that makes sense, because people will seek her out. And it doesn't just have to be that she goes on vacation and someone is murdered. Although I've got nothing wrong with our Jessica Fletchers and Poirots of the world, who every time they show up on a boat, someone is thrown overboard. I respect that a lot. But it gives me a mechanism by which these things can happen, that people will come to her and say, "I heard about a murder once," which is what happens in Nine Liars, that she goes to England to see her boyfriend and have a week of study abroad and see England and like point at all the things that are old and go, "Castle, English person." And someone sidles up to her and says, "I know about a murder. Do you want to hear about a murder?"
I would be like, yes, as long as I'm not gonna also get murdered.
Yeah, I mean, so the case of Nine Liars is that in 1995, there was a group of students from Cambridge, and they had a comedy theater group together, and they were best friends, as theater people are, and they all lived together and were on top of each other all the time. And when they graduated, one of them, their family owns a big country manor house called Merriweather, and they all went there for a week to drink and to celebrate and to kind of say goodbye to the fact that they were graduating. And the first night that they arrived, they're all drinking champagne and they're playing this drunken game of hide and seek on the grounds. And two of them don't come back. And they're like, "Oh, well, they're obviously off somewhere together. Let's not worry about it." But they are found in the morning and they've been murdered. And it's always in the woodshed with an axe, because I wanted to keep it as, I wanted to do the thing. I wanted to do the woodshed. And it's thought to be a burglary. A lot of outbuildings get burgled and things get stolen from sheds and things like that, especially if a country house, people think the owners are going to be away. But it wasn't a burglary. And it turns out that some of the people in that group of 9 have a secret about, or have multiple secrets about, what happened in 1995. So, and they go to, and they find Stevie and they say, "Hey," or the niece of one of the people says, "Hey, I know about a murder. There's this burglary, but it wasn't a burglary."
That's so fun. It's giving me like If We Were Villains vibes, which is, I don't know if you're familiar. It's a mystery, super good. If you haven't read it, go read it. It's about actors and a murder. So it's great.
Yeah, this is very much about a group of actors, a group of Cambridge students, about people that are acting people are very, theater people are very close. But it's also about some very bad deeds.
I love a book about very bad deeds. I also wanted to ask you, what is it like to be continuing the Truly Devious series in a different setting, in a different country, in England?
So my husband's English. I spend a lot of time there. And a lot of my books end up being set there because of the amount of time. It's not where we live, but it is the other home. And I also wrote a book recently, a kind of a shorter book called Your Guide to Not Getting Murdered in a Quaint English Village, that is in many ways based on the English village that my husband grew up in, which is ridiculous. It is something like out of Midsummer Murders, truly. It is absolutely, it's so much more real than I thought it was.
I love that so much.
Yes, it's always, everyone's angry at the vicar. There's all this secret stuff that's buried underground. People get angry. They have the smallest grudges that turn into the biggest grudges. In his village, the day I met my husband, we met, and I was going to go back to the US, and he's like, well, it's my mother's birthday. I'm having a party for her. She lives out in the forest. Come with me. Just come to my parents' house. We have ponies. And I was like, all right. So I just went with him. And they have horses, they have ponies. I was suddenly thrust into like a croquet game with this English family that I'd never met. On the beautiful summer day, he walks me through the forest, and they have wild horses all around. The wild horses are coming up to us, and he walks me down this path to the 13th century church, and it's all cute. And I'm like, oh, baby Shetlands, this is amazing. And he very casually says, oh, by the way, over there is Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. He's buried there. He's just there. Just over there. His parents help take care of him. I was like, are you a real person? Is this a real place? Every story he tells, it feels more and more like he grew up under a magic mushroom. Like, it is not, a horse broke into their house once on Christmas. This is what he's like. This is what it's like dealing with my husband. So a lot of my stories end up in England. Cambridge, because Cambridge has a history of producing famous comedians and the Footlights, and all the English comedians Cambridge has a cannon. They just shoot out comedians. And my husband went to Cambridge, so I had a lot of information about how actually the Cambridge colleges work.
That is so cool. I lived in England for 3 years, and I never had a horse break into my house on Christmas.
Where did you live?
We lived in Virginia Water, which is in Surrey. It's like 45 minutes outside London. Yeah, it was fun.
Well, he lived in Guildford, so in Surrey. But his parents live in the New Forest.
Nice.
Which is an old forest, but because it's England, it's called a New Forest because it's only 800 years old.
Oh my goodness.
That's great. That story sounds like it could be an opening for someone else's or your own book. Sounds great. And is there anything new that you're working on that you want to tell us about?
Well, I'm working on Death at Morning House, and then the 2 other Stevie Bell mysteries, and hopefully some other stuff that I'll be able to talk about soon. But I have lots to do, which is great. Literally sitting here with my notebook open beside me, and just more mysteries, more stuff. I was a little slowed down. I was on tour and I got COVID, which is so I feel like I'm just trying to pick up where I left off, because it got me pretty much at my first event. I avoided it for 3 years, did one event, got COVID. I caught it. I actually developed it. I was in California. And then I was like, oh, I'm sneezing. Oh, I feel weird. Oh, I'm about to fall down. Tested positive. And then I was at a friend's house when it happened. And then I went to a hotel and I quarantined for a week on the beach and just peered out the window and got takeout, and I was just this weirdo living in a hotel on the beach. I was on the cover of the local paper.
What?
Weirdo author in hotel with COVID, comes out at night, stands on balcony, points at sky. So yeah, little COVID adventures on the trail.
Oh my goodness. Well, we're glad that you're feeling better now and that it didn't take you out for too long.
It got me for 2 weeks. I didn't think it would be that bad when it finally got me, and it was worse than I thought, but I finally recovered. It's nasty. I don't like it. I don't know if you've had it. I don't recommend it.
Yeah, I'm trying to avoid it as much as possible. Yeah.
I got away for 3 years, but it gets you sometimes.
Definitely. Also, before we go, do you want to talk about any social media you want to plug, any books you're reading that you're loving, anything like that you want to recommend?
Well, let's see. I'm on Twitter at Maureen Johnson. I'm on Instagram at Maureen Johnson Books. My website is just maureenjohnson.com. I'm reading a pile of stuff right now. So some nonfiction stuff. Obviously, I'm reading Hellbent right now, which is, the sequel to Ninth House.
I'm screaming. I'm waiting to read it because I'm so excited. I want to savor it so much.
Yeah, Leah's wonderful. I love Lee. She's a wonderful person, and she's so great. And she's just so smart about so many things. She's also a professional makeup artist. She was a professional makeup artist as a job. She did makeup for film and TV. And so she knows a lot about makeup and things.
That makes
She's,
so much sense. She always has the best eye look going
yeah.
on. Like I follow all these people on Instagram and I always see her and I'm like, that's like crazy. Like how do you do that yourself? I can barely do mascara. It's crazy. She's very talented, so that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, no, she's a professional. And I learned so much about fake hair. She's like, so much the hair, get the hair. I was like, not me, I am a hippie. And like, no, you get this, you get this. And she's like, oh no, the hair, you get the extra hair put in and the extensions and all the stuff. And I'm like, it's so glamorous, so glamorous. I'm not very glamorous. I'm just sort of a writer. So my Instagram is a little more real.
I mean, your books are glamorous. So if you just post your book cover, it looks very glamorous.
They are. The 9 Layers cover is absolutely one of my favorites. I love it so much. I really lucked out.
Definitely. I saw it on Instagram. I think you posted like that the cover came out and I couldn't wait to get my hands on it because it was so gorgeous.
I'm trying to make Instagram more of my home. I don't TikTok because I feel like I like book talk the way it is. Like I like to see people talk about books more than I want to make my own TikToks about it. Like I just actually would rather just watch people. So but yeah, I need to use Instagram a little bit more.
Yes, there's always the push and pull. I feel like I use it too much. Some people should use it more. Social media is nonsense. But yeah.
My home was Twitter, and because I like to, because I always prefer just words. But it's not a great platform right now, and it's exploding, and it's a lot of times the worst. But it's a great place to kind of meet writers and journalists, and I've met so many journalists in particular on it, and made so many friends. So it's a really interesting place for, or it was certainly for exchanging information, and could be again, if it doesn't explode into a column of pure fire.
Yes, which it very well could, unfortunately.
Yeah, it seems highly, highly combustible.
Yes, for sure. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for coming on our podcast and for having such thoughtful answers to all of our questions.
It was great to meet you.
It was so wonderful to meet you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
That concludes our interview with Maureen Johnson. I loved hearing her talk about the process behind how she plotted the Truly Devious series and how she wanted to write a detective story where you really get to know the detective and you're rooting for her to solve the mystery. I also loved hearing her talk about how dialogue is such a useful tool in stories and how characters often aren't saying exactly what they're thinking, so you can write out the exact words a character is saying and then write out the unspoken meaning behind their words. I also loved hearing her talk about the collaborative aspect behind how she approaches writing romance and how she'll talk to some of her author friends about the romance plot points in her story, and it will help her to get a fully fleshed out version of the romances in her novels. If you would like to follow Maureen Johnson on social media, I will include links to all of her social media down below. I will also be including links to places where you can buy her books and the place where you can check out her books at the library. I will also be including links to the books she recommended on the podcast and the link to the book Sophie recommended on the podcast. If you would like to follow us on social media, our Instagram is at keeping.tabs.podcast, our TikTok is at keepingtabspodcast, and our YouTube is Keeping Tabs Podcast. Feel free to leave a rating or a review of us on Apple Podcasts as well. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode, and we will see you soon with a new one. Bye!